Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to own their power, create influence and impact, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time to leverage your expertise, resources, and relationships to build your business, brand, and badassery. So just click subscribe and let's get it. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. And today with me, my guest is Nicole Walker. Nicole is an award-winning podcaster, global influencer, international speaker, podcast coach, and women empowerment advocate. Yes, she is all of those things. And Nicole attributes much of her personal and professional success to starting her podcast, Win Hers United, because it changed her life. So we will talk about that a lot, Nicole, because I think it's so important for people to understand, our backstories. And Nicole has been named a top 50 mom in podcasting, and Win Hers United has received numerous accolades, such as being ranked among the top 10% of podcasts worldwide and winning the Best Black Business Podcast of 2020 award. Go, sis. So proud of you. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it.
I'm so happy to have you here on the podcast because I know that before I started my podcast, I had spoken to you at one point about doing a podcast, and I was like, I don't know about all that. I don't know that I want to do all that. And then here I am doing the podcast. So I'm so blessed to have you on as a guest. So I want to start with you. When you talk about that you attribute podcasting, right, to your personal and professional success, what do you mean by that?
Okay. So with podcasting, and I say this often, like I feel like I teleported into a entirely different realm, like kid you not. So before podcasting, I didn't necessarily hang around the people that are going in the direction that I pivoted my life to go into, right? So wasn't focused on entrepreneurship, wasn't focused on business. I've always been the kind of person that, drops knowledge, go-to person, but that wasn't my main thing. It was more of a party girl lifestyle. Let's hang out, chill, things like that. And when I started podcasting, it came from the need of wanting to see women support other women. It came from wanting to see people talk about mindset principles and going from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, right? So all of these things that I wish I had or I wish I saw in the world that at the time I wasn't seeing. So when I decided to start my podcast, it actually opened me up to this world, right? Like I tell this and people probably think I'm crazy, but like I thought I was the first person creating this kind of platform because in my world, it didn't exist, right? So when I decided that I wanted to be the change that I wanted to see, I then was exposed to this world of people that also want to be the change in the world, right? So networking with different women, going to different conferences, like really immersing myself amongst a new network of people that then allowed me to help others as well as level up myself.
Yeah. And I love that you said to be the change that you want to see, right? So often we talk about things, I wish things were different. I wish, we could have this over here or that over there. And we don't realize that we are the somebody who could make that happen, right? We are the people who could create that change. So what was going on in your life before you came into, the world of podcasting?
Well, I actually relocated, right? So, I'll take a step back. So for several years, I was functionally depressed, right? I didn't know I was depressed though, right? I was living the life that I knew, and had become accustomed to, not realizing that I wasn't okay. I think that it's been taboo and sometimes still is taboo to say I'm not okay. So I'm living this life, working in corporate America, married at the time. I don't know if I had my second child as of yet. So, first, my daughter, maybe my son, own a house, all of these things that the world tells you is the way to go. But yet on the inside, I didn't feel that way. Right. So, coming into accepting that I wasn't okay, trying entrepreneurship things here or there. This is back when I lived in New Jersey, but none of them really panning out. And then I relocated from New Jersey to Florida because my daughter decided to go to college in New Orleans. So praise God for my daughter, because she really was a catalyst. Like I always say, she saved my life. I was a teen parent, but like a lot of her existence helped me to want to do other things, right? And with her deciding to move from New Jersey to New Orleans, I was like, look, I'm not okay with no 18-hour distance between me and my daughter, right? Like
right.
this is not okay. Right? So like, what am I going to do? Right? I don't want to be the parent that moves next door to the daughter. Like, I don't want to be that parent. But I can't do this 18 hours. And I had always talked about relocating, but that's another, like you could talk about it all you want, when you actually do it, that's when, you make it real and it happens. So she was that push. So I decided to move to Florida because I'm like, okay, I cut the distance down from 18 to 9 hours. I'm close, but I'm not too close. She won't feel like
right. She won't think I'm knocking on the door.
Exactly. Right. So so that, that move really changed a lot for me, because I remember saying, I'm going to try entrepreneurship again, and I'm going to take it seriously this time. Right. I feel like we put things in front of ourselves to kind of validate who we are when we really don't need that validation. Right. So back in 2016, I got my master's degree because I felt like, to be taken seriously in the entrepreneurial world, I need a master's degree. Right. But then 2 years later, I got a master's degree, but I'm still not doing nothing. So it's like, okay, Nicole, what other excuse do you need?
Right.
To show up the way that you want to show up, the way that you deserve to show up. Right. Because I was feeling lackluster with the life that was in front of me. So that move, getting away from everyone I knew, and not knowing anyone here, it forced me to change the things I did. Right. Like I chose not to be the party girl, right? Because I didn't want to be the solo party girl, right? Like I don't have a crew to party with, right? So it's like, well, what can I do by myself? Oh, I could go to this business class, or I could go to these expos, and that kind of got the ball rolling in relation to me becoming a podcaster. So it was when I hired a business coach that he suggested podcasting, because I didn't even know what a podcast was.
Yeah. And how has being a podcaster impacted your life?
Night and day. So from being a podcaster, I have, like I said, just changed my network of people. The people that I surround myself with is totally different. I've become an international speaker, all because of being a podcaster. Like I would have never applied to these speaking engagements had I not been a podcaster, right? Putting myself in a podcasting community then allowed me to be asked to be a speaker on several different platforms, right? I've been featured in a book about podcasting. So being featured in a book, right? Receiving awards, just all of these things that I didn't even conceptualize.
Yeah.
Right. It just unfolded, it just literally unfolded.
Yeah.
And, and then on top of that, like, I think like the real shift is like the mindset, and realizing whatever I want to do, if I put forth the effort, I can do it, realizing that imposter syndrome is real, right? So it's always going to be this voice telling me that, oh, that's not good enough. Nobody likes you, right? But learning how to quiet that voice, because as I continue to move and do things, I continue to want to be better, right? So I have to learn how to handle these things that it comes to you, regardless of what stage of life you're in, right? Like, but you have to know how to maneuver around them and push past them. What else? I don't know.
No, that's awesome, because it's interesting because when I talk to you about podcasting, part of the resistance that I had around podcasting was like, listen, I don't have time for another thing to do, right? I don't have time, and listening to people talking about all the editing and all the things that you have to do and to make it perfect and to do all this. And I was like, I don't have time to just be talking to people, to just do whatever. And then when I went to this workshop over to actually launch my podcast, what really struck me in the way that Heather Ann Havenwood is my podcasting coach, was that she talked about it from being a business.
It is.
Right. And using it as one of the, just another pillar within your brand. Like, how do you really make your voice heard? And as I have watched you over the year, so, we connected and being part of Ladies Who Leverage, and I watch and all the things that have happened with you with the podcast. And when we're talking about, all these amazing awards that you've had, it has been in a short period of time, Nicole. And I think the credit to that is that you have really just taken this on as a business, right? It's not that you're just a podcast host, right? Or I have this little podcast over here. Like, this is a business for you. So talk about what that means when I say, because I see it now, especially from having this vantage point. But how is that different, right, than taking it seriously as a business, as opposed to, oh, I just have this podcast and I'm just talking to people every now and then?
Yeah, so it is really, again, mindset and the way you look at things. So ironically, though, when I started my podcast, in my mind, my podcast was a funnel to my business. And my business was supposed to be leadership development, coaching, things like that, which indirectly I help people with that, right? But that's not my moneymaker. So that's what I set it up to be. But I never advertised that I am this leadership development person, come to me for these trainings. I never advertised that, but I continue to advertise my podcast, my podcast, my podcast. It just, one thing about me is that I'm an activator, right? So once I set my mind on something, I'm going.
Yep.
I'm going. So with the podcast, it was there and it was tangible, right? The leadership to me was intangible because I hadn't, I don't know, really put in all of my eggs like I did with the podcast. And over time, I would say maybe a year or less than a year, maybe a year, right? Like I came to a crossroads of really trying to hold both of these things up, thinking, because I was getting frustrated because I'm like, well, nobody's coming to me for this leadership thing, right?
Right.
But I never promoted it. I thought they were just supposed to come from osmosis and just hop over and know that this is who I am. Like, are you kidding me? How do you not see this, right? You're supposed to read my mind. So in trying to do these two things, I just decided, I said, you know what? I'm just going to do the podcast and I'm going to be okay with doing the podcast, not realizing that all along, that's what I was doing. Like I was doing it all along. Right. And once I actually fully decided to immerse myself and do that, next thing you know, people were coming to me like, I want you to teach me podcasting, right? Like that was never in my plans, and a lot of times I still wonder if I want it to be in my plans, right? But like you said, because people see all of the success that I've gotten from it, they want that from me. So it happened organically, and it's just I have a, what do you call that? I operate in excellence, right? It's just my nature of how I do things, so that's how it was able to just work itself out that way. And I'm actually grateful that it did, right? Yeah, I'm grateful that it did. So, but what I do tell people in relation to, when I coach in different workshops is that, like, whatever your goal is, have that goal at the forefront before, when you start, and then make sure that you are crafting whatever you're doing around that goal, right? Because I had this goal, but I didn't craft it around the goal, right? So it ended up creating a life of its own, which luckily I'm grateful that it happened, so.
Yeah. You always have to, I always tell people begin with the end in mind, right? So I didn't make that up. People say it all the time, but that is truly, I think, the best way to get anything done, right? And then I'm a master of reverse engineering. So if I can see it, I can figure out how to do all the things that I need to get there. So, one of the things that you told me is that your favorite quote by Henry Ford is, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Right. And it's almost, that's what you have been living in terms of, listen, I'm just going to do this. I can do this. Right. And I know that in the past year or so, there was a hiccup with regards to your podcast. And it's something that you could have derailed you, but it didn't. So to explain to the listeners what I'm talking about, because I know the story, but I think it's important for people to understand that sometimes as we're going along and we're doing well, there's something or someone who is going to get in your way and try to derail you off your path, and you really have to stand in your power and move forward. So would you mind sharing with us?
I love the way you built that up though. Let's just take a pause and celebrate you. That was awesome. So, okay, yeah. So in I want to say August, maybe August of last year, I ended up getting an email. And in the email, it was asking for a meeting, right? I don't remember the exact title, but it was something about my business name. So basically, I ended up being approached by a person that had the previous name of my podcast under trademark, right? So within that conversation, it's like, okay, I have this trademarked. You either have to come under my company, you have to change the name, or you have to pay me to use the name, right? And the what she actually wanted was for me to come under her company, right? So at this time I had just reached 20,000 downloads, like coming off of a big milestone, really excited about everything that I built from the ground up, not knowing anything about podcasting, well, over the time, of course, I
Right.
attended workshops and things like that, but from the beginning, really infancy, right? And I was approached with this, right? So, took some time, stepped back, thought about it, debated about it, decided to rebrand, right? So I had to rebrand my podcast, which, like you said, that it could have derailed me because it was so emotional, to have to like let go of something that you created, and in the like looking in hindsight, I really didn't let go of anything. I just
Mhm.
changed the name. But initially that's what it felt like. It felt like a failure, it felt like what is gonna happen. Like it was just so gray and kind of defeating. It kind of did feel like I was defeated. Like, like what did I do all of this work for? But on the flip side of that, it was like well, I must be doing something because if
Right.
she's
She is coming for me. She knows
right,
who I am.
and then the funny part about that really is like this name was overused in the market, so for her to come after me, like I even asked her, I'm like, well, are you going after everybody else? Like, because I'm one of many. I'm not the only one, right? But I want to say I was the only person of color,
Mm.
that was using this name, right? And then, like this is, like I said, the summertime, like that was when the whole people of color thing was like, oh, we got to help these people or get in on this thing that's going,
Right.
so I don't know if that was the premise. I'm not gonna, assume, but it was a thought in my head, like, oh, what's going on here? Right. But, I did decide to do a rebrand. And, after actually accepting that that's what I was going to do, deciding not to allow defeat, it ended up being one of the best decisions I could have ever made. I was able to differentiate myself in the market, created a unique name. People understand what the name is. I actually get a lot of people loving the name, you know. Yeah, and it was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
And the lesson, when I think about that story, the lesson in that is to just not give up on your dreams, right? Because the couple of things you could have done is just been like, okay, just forget it. I'll just go underneath her, right? So just giving away your power in some ways, giving away your autonomy to just because you would be so beholden to that name, right? Sometimes we hang on to things,
Yeah.
right? And because we're hanging on to those things, it takes us off of our path, or it causes us to give up our power to someone else. And
Yeah.
so, I loved the process that you went through, because you didn't just be like, okay, whatever, like you fought, right? There, you were like, I'm going to figure out what's going on. I'm going to reach out to the people who can help me to figure out, what are my options? Because that's the other thing too, right? To when you are confronted with something like this, to really reach out to the people that to figure out what are your options. Because when you said, you're defeated and it's stressful and you've built all this and now what do I do? You could make some really bad decisions by not, reaching out. So I think that that was awesome. And, when you rebranded, right? Did people just came along with you, right? It wasn't like oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
And
you
you know
have a
what
new
the
name.
funny yeah, and the funny part about that is like, well, to take two steps back, right?
Okay.
I love what you said as far as the people, right? Because I believe, like the people you surround yourself with, your counsel, that's super important, right? So kudos to you because you was one of those people for me, to point me in the right
Right.
direction of a trademark attorney, right? So
Yeah.
now my name is under trademark, hopefully I'll be getting the notice soon, right? So that is super important. Then also too, like knowing when to take advice and when not to take
That's
advice,
right.
right? Because some of the people told me, oh, just say you decided to change directions. Oh, like people rebrand every day, which they do, right? But I a lot of my life is an open book, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because I feel like we go through to help others get through. So when this happened, I let people know, like under construction, something
Right.
happened that I totally didn't plan for. I didn't give the story initially because I, baited to give it, when I rebranded, right? But I wanted to be real with people and to also like my premise is to help people. Like I know that I'm not the only person that this may have happened to or that this may happen to in the future. Right.
Right.
So let me help you. Let me share the story about no, I didn't rebrand because I felt like changing the name. No, this happened. This is real. I didn't do the trademark search I should have did in the beginning
In the
because I didn't
beginning.
even know anything about a trademark search. I didn't know anything about that. I did a search on podcast names. Nothing came up, right? I didn't do a search on trademark because my mind wasn't even on trademark, right? So that was really a part of me sharing that journey with people. I decided to delay the release of my seventh season,
Hmm.
right? Until I got everything together. And people were so forgiving because of that. People were so forgiving. And then another caveat, right? Like I thought about possibly going with the lady if she would have offered partnership, right?
Mm.
Because I'm bringing all of these downloads, all of these people. You don't have that. You may have business connections, but we both have something valuable. Like you weren't talking partnership, you were talking a layer under. No, I'm not okay with that, right? So really understanding your worth and your value. And then two, like I wanted to keep my seventh season within the original time I allotted. So I asked the lady, well, what would I have to pay you to use the name for this period of time? She's like $1,500 a month, 500 hit, like this astronomical amount of money. Like, and I'm like, you know what, lady, forget it. That's when
Mm-mm.
I was like, look,
No.
y'all, this is what's happening. Either you with me or you not. Either you
Right.
with me or you not. And at the end of the day, you want to know who's with you or who's not with you because it's okay. I'm not for
That's right.
everybody, and it's okay.
That's right. And asking the right questions. So even in what you were doing, saying, "Listen, I know my value. I know what I'm bringing to the table. So if you want to talk as equals, we could talk about that. I'm not your subordinate, right? All we have in common at this point is that I'm using a name that you've trademarked, right? So, being able to ask those questions and understand that you do have value, no matter what people are saying to you. We think a lot of people think that, somebody who's been doing it longer or whatever, it just means they started first. And that's all
That's
it
it.
means.
That's
They
it.
started first. It doesn't mean anything, right? I had posted, I think, in the group the other day about you don't have to be at the top to be the top. There
Hmm.
are lots of people at the top of organizations and at the top of the game, right? Quote unquote, the top of the game, who are not the smartest, who are not the brightest, who are not the most resourceful, or not any of those things. But what they've learned is they have value and how to communicate that value and how to negotiate that value. So I think
Hmm.
that that was really important that you said, you thought about it, but not in terms of, oh, I'm just going to subordinate myself to you. But if you want to be a partner, right, where we can mutually benefit each other, then that's one thing. So I think that that was just brilliant on your part to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, it took, you know what? But it was a long time coming, right?
Mhm.
So I want people to really understand, like, like you said, they started earlier. Like where I am now is night and day from where I was before. And you talked about something like where you could be on the top without being on the top, right? So in corporate America, I've always been known as the go-to person, right? Very resourceful, has the information, can point you in the right direction of the right people, right? Can help you to figure it out. But at that point in time, I didn't see my value,
Mm.
because I am even still like one position above entry level in a company that I've worked for 15 years. Like that just made my blood a little hot.
Right.
You know,
Make you hot.
right?
Right? The
And
realization.
and that messed with me, right? Because it made me not like, if I was so great, then why am I not further along, to where whatever magical place that I imagined I would be, right? And that messed with me for a lot of years. But with podcasting, like being able to get these accolades and people to recognize my work without me having to kiss anyone's ass, or suck up to people, because that's not my thing. Like I'm about real relationships, right? And just allowing my work to speak for itself, but it took a long time for me to realize that I was of value, because I felt so devalued in my everyday life in the past, and people overlooked my contributions.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I want to go back a little further. So we've talked a lot about your podcast and we kind of skipped over this a little bit, the fact that you're a teen mom. And, to talk about that, because we have a lot of, young women who, get pregnant, and you, like you said, we're on this path, right? We've been put on this path. You're supposed to, graduate from high school, go to college, then, get a job, then get married, then have the kids and all this stuff. How has being a teen mom impacted your life and who you have become?
Good question. So it was really interesting with me becoming a teen mom, right? Because I graduated number 8 in my high school class, right? So
Go ahead,
always
girl. Go, sis.
Thank you, right?
Smart, y'all.
So top 10%, right?
Yeah.
I'm on the stage.
Yeah,
right?
me too.
The caveat is I'm on the stage with a belly, right? Like something just isn't adding up.
Right.
So always super smart, just didn't always make the best decisions, right? Didn't really have any vision, for my life, any particular goals. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, that gave me a drive that I didn't have, right? Like super naive. Like when I found out I was number 8 in the class, I was surprised along with everybody else. Like, what? I'm number 8 in the class. Like, I used to think everyone was just as smart as I was, right? Like really, like didn't really, I don't judge people, or it's more of what kind of person, how do you make me feel, not how much do you know, like that's kind of the place I live in or have lived in, and well, still like to live in, right? So I didn't realize how smart I was. I didn't realize how unique I was, and didn't have any drive. So my daughter gave me that drive, that reason to want to push and work. Like I graduated in June, 8, 9 months pregnant. I had my daughter in July. In September, I was in college. I graduated in 4 years with a computer science degree with a kid. Like people without kids was taking 5 years.
Right.
Like
Right.
I'm working full time, my own apartment, like really laser focus. So my daughter helped me to get a laser focus, because not only did I have to take care of myself, I had to take care of this little person, right? My daughter also changed my life, because of my daughter, I started to go to therapy and realized that I had like this depression and all of these different things going on. It was because something happened in her life. Right. So, I wish that the thing never happened in her life, but had it not happened and I didn't want to help my daughter, I wouldn't have got help myself.
Wow.
Because of my daughter, I'm relocated in a place where I could bloom into this person that I am today, all because of my daughter, So I always say, like, my daughter saved my life. I don't promote teen pregnancy. I do feel like it makes your life harder than it has to
Mhm.
be, you know,
But
but
it doesn't make it impossible.
it does not. It does
Right.
not. And it's so funny. I remember a conversation with my parents where it's like, oh, you're throwing your life away, this, and that. And I'm like, well, being pregnant is not going to make me lose my brain cells. Like, I'm still going to be smart, right?
Right.
But it is this stigma. And I
Yeah.
did have to climb out of this place of low self-worth, right? Because of what I was told, or like the narrative, my self-worth was in the basement because I had this child at this young age, but yet always had the drive to want to do better and want to show her better.
Yeah, it's interesting what kids do for you because they'll drive you crazy. But but I wrote a poem about my son, and it was called "Someone to Fight For." And I wrote about it in my first book, and it's this thing that you have, like you said, you had this little person, right?
Yeah.
And that little person was pushing you. You're like, I brought this little person into the world. I owe it to them.
Yeah.
Right? Even if not to yourself, even if you don't think at that moment to yourself,
Yep.
I owe it to them, right? To do better, to be better, right? And so I love that you tell that story. And I like to ask those stories because so many of us had children when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was older. I had my child when I was 21, but I was still a young person. Right. And I was still in college. And I think it's important that as we go through life, that we share these stories so that the women and young women and young girls who come behind us know that it's not the end of the world. But as you say, it makes the world harder.
It does.
Right.
Yeah,
And it means that you have to be even more dedicated, even more driven, even more committed, right? To being the best person that you can be and really going after your hopes and your dreams and your goals.
exactly.
So, as you are taking on the podcasting world by storm, what is next for Nicole?
What is next for Nicole? That's a good question. So, of course, continuing with the podcast, actually planning some changes for season 8, which comes out in July, right? So, continuing to move forward with that. In December of last year, I hosted my first virtual summit based off of
Yes.
the podcast, right? So, we'll be bringing you a virtual summit again this year sometime in the fourth quarter, probably November, maybe early December, still planning out the actual date, but still moving forward with that, really immersing myself into podcast coaching and helping other people feel this liberation that I've been able to feel because I realized that my voice mattered, right? Because I realized people do care what I have to say, right? I can help someone. So, really helping other people in doing that as well.
Yay. Cannot wait. Cannot wait. So proud of you. I love watching your journey. I just love watching women's journeys.
Yes.
And the bumps that we hit, but how we maneuver and how we negotiate and navigate that whole space. And
Yes.
so I'm proud of you. I can't wait to see what you come up with your next summit. What's gonna happen in the next season, because having 7 seasons is huge. I mean, podcasts come and go all day, every day.
Thank you.
So I'm aspiring to be you.
Hey.
and to keep going with the podcast. But if our listeners want to follow you, connect with you, subscribe to your podcast, because I want them to do that too, how can they do that?
Okay, so you can find us on almost all podcasting platforms, I believe all, right? Win Hers United, WINHERSUNITED. So just search that in your podcast player. It should come up. You can go to winhersunited.com, and from there you can link out to my different social media platforms. Send me an email, winhersunited@gmail.com. I love to hear from people. Just remember that's Win Hers, right? A play on us women who are winning. So remember that it's hers, WINHERS.
That's awesome. I was just going to say, tell us what the name means. Well, I'm so glad that you took the time to hang out with us today on Ladies Who Leverage podcast and for joining me on my journey in Ladies Who Leverage. It's been awesome for the past year being with all of you amazing women and building this global community. So keep kicking ass.
Thank you.
Taking names.
Yes.
I'm watching, and I know everybody else is watching and cheering you on. And for everyone who's listening today, thank you for tuning in. Please make sure that you subscribe to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. And if you want to join our amazing community so that you can meet women like Nicole, please go to lwlinvestor.com and check us out. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. If you're a badass woman who's ready to take action to live life unapologetically AF, then you need to join our global community on Facebook, Ladies Who Leverage. And remember to subscribe to our podcast. And until next time, let's collabosource, strategize, and monetize.